everyone. Happy Veterans Day. I'm joined by Richard Manning, the president of Americans for Limited Government. We want to say thanks to all the veterans out there, all of those who have paid the price for our freedom. Rick, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, obviously, Veterans Day is a day for those who served. Memorial Day is a day for those who died in service to the country. But every single person out there who served our country, who went overseas or domestically, who volunteered to join the military, or who was drafted and went, America owes you a great debt of gratitude. And I hope you're having a great day.
Thank you. And Rick, earlier this week, I had the privilege of interviewing retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Myers. He served for 28 years as a military intelligence officer, and he shared with us a really nice message for this Veterans Day. And let me just pull just a clip of what he had to say.
Just say for anybody watching, this is a very special Veterans Day because there's a whole lot of Afghanistan and even Iraq and War on Terror veterans that are not feeling their best about how things happen in Afghanistan. So, it's important to, if you know one of those veterans, to reach out and let them know that their service was valued and that it wasn't in vain.
Rick, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, 100%. It's anybody out there, if you have a son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter, friend, or if you yourself served in Afghanistan in particular, I really want you to know that you did your job. You did your job. You did the job you were asked to do. People got educated in Afghanistan who wouldn't have gotten educated otherwise. People's lives were made better because of our presence there. And what's really unfortunate is that a political decision undercut all the value because we didn't make a political decision that allowed us to get out and allow the people who were left behind to be self-sufficient. We didn't make a decision the right decision in so many ways. But the fact of the matter is, you did your job. The world was safer because of the job you did. And you should be very proud of the job you did. And from Americans for Limited Government, I'd like to say thank you.
And here, I say amen to that. Thank you to all our veterans. We are very, very grateful because you all have paid the price for our freedoms and our liberties. So thank you. And Rick, related to that is our Second Amendment right to self-defense. That is unique in the world. You and I both worked at the National Rifle Association. You worked there as a lobbyist. I worked in the Public Affairs Department. So we definitely have a background and a great passion for our Second Amendment rights and our ability to protect and defend ourselves. And there's been a couple of news developments recently related to that, really big ones. The first one, which we'll talk about, is the Rittenhouse trial in Wisconsin. And then after we talk about that, I want to hear what your take is. There's also last week a huge hearing at the Supreme Court related to our ability to carry a firearm for self-protection. So let me just jump right into this clip that many people have probably already seen. It's Kyle Rittenhouse taking the stand in his own defense in the trial in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
I look over my shoulder and Mr. Rosenbaum was now running from my right side, and I was cornered from in front of me with Mr. Zeminski, and there were three people right there.
Take a deep breath, Kyle.
That's what That's what I run.
So Rick, right at that point, the judge called for a pause. I mean, for obvious reasons. First, just your reaction to what's going on there in that trial.
A young man went with the intention of trying to protect private property from people who were breaking the law. They were looting, they were burning buildings, they were destroying private and public property. And he went there with the intention of trying to participate in trying to help. And he found himself in a position where he was being attacked by multiple people. And he ended up shooting and killing two and who were attacking him. And another who was basically drawing down on him and getting ready to shoot him. And the testimony that we've seen, this trial has been really a tour de force in terms of the prosecution putting a witness after witness who their testimony themselves said it was self-defense. And yet somehow the prosecution is trying to convict this young man for murder. And so really what we're seeing is the right to self-defense on trial. It can't be put any other way. The commentators on the left all point to a simple fact that, he was there, he did have a firearm. And as a result of having and they want to say, that he's guilty of murder because he had a firearm. Well, firearms aren't the cause of anything that happens. They're a tool, first of all. Secondly, if he had not had a firearm, it's highly likely that his parents would be crying in a sentencing hearing for the thugs who killed him. So the bottom line on this is he defended his life. The people who were the aggressors in this ended up dying. And, you have a right to defend your life. Just a fact. You have a right to defend your life. And we have to be able to uphold that. And this court case will go a long way to, if he's found guilty, I don't know how self-defense ever gets accepted anywhere. He retreated and he got cornered and he was in an inferior position physically and people attacked him and he defended himself. That's the bottom line on it, is classic self-defense. And it couldn't be over soon enough for this country because it really, this is a fight we don't need in this country right now.
Any of you watching on Facebook or YouTube or Rumble right now, feel free to comment on our video and join the conversation. We would love to hear what you think about what's happening in Kenosha, Wisconsin, with the Rittenhouse trial. I'll tell you, Rick, seeing young Kyle, he's 18 now, he was 17 years old at the time of the incident, is very difficult for me as the mother of a young 18-year-old boy. Well, I guess he's a man, but to me, he's still a boy. That's just horrifying to think that could be my son sitting up there on trial like that. It's devastating for so many of us to watch it. And I think we all sort of bring our own background to what we're seeing. But for me, I think it's just identifying with him, as a young man, imagining that could be my son up there on trial. So, it's just very hard to watch. And there's so many sort of behind the scenes machinations going on at that trial. Now there's some talk that perhaps the prosecution is intentionally trying to get a mistrial because they would rather have a mistrial than an acquittal. And that's the reason why the judge keeps, sort of lashing out at the prosecution. They're always sort of stepping over that line. Any thoughts on what the strategy is there?
Well, I think it's clear the prosecution knows that they've lost on the facts, and now they're attempting to throw the trial, because if they can throw the trial, they'll be able to retry it, and with a different jury and a different judge, and from their point of view, maybe some different rulings about what will be allowed and not allowed. And so they're trying to throw the game and really in This is reminiscent of the, the 1960s, where the Chicago Seven were on trial, and the attorneys for the Chicago Seven, they were rioting outside the Democratic National Convention. They were arrested. Some of the leaders of the far left anti-war movement, and they were arrested and put on trial. And their attorneys would engage in the most outlandish behavior in an attempt to intimidate the judge, in an attempt to get headlines, in an attempt to throw cases. They didn't care about what the rules were. And it appears as though this prosecutor comes from that same ilk, because he's violating a lot of standard rules in terms of what you can and can't do. And he's doing it deliberately in an attempt to have this trial ended before it's actually before a jury decides that Kyle is in fact not guilty. So that's what he's trying to do. It's disgusting to watch, and he should be, in a rational world, he would be disbarred.
Rick, the other big thing with regards to our Second Amendment rights was last week, the U.S. Supreme Court heard a case from is it the city of New York or the state of New York? They have very restrictive laws on your ability to carry a firearm outside your home. And it's finally come to the Supreme Court. Was it the state or the city? And tell me more about the significance of this case.
The New York State Rifle and Pistol Association has sued the state of New York over concealed carry laws, which do not allow people to get licenses to carry unless they meet very arbitrary standards. And so the case has wound its way through the court system, is now before the Supreme Court. The reason, without commenting specifically on the case, what we do know is this. One of the presumptions, this goes to the Rittenhouse case also, but one of the presumptions that we heard from Stephen Breyer, Justice Stephen Breyer, who's the dean of the liberals on the court, was that the mere presence of a handgun, mere presence of a gun was in fact a predictor or a motivator for violence, that the gun itself is present actually would create more homicides. And the fact is that just is not true. The data shows that is not true. And now you mentioned I was with the National Rifle Association. I was a lobbyist well before you became a public affairs person. You were obviously much younger than I am. But many, many years ago in Florida in 1987, we had a fight over concealed carry. And there was a law that was really, at the time, was the kind of landmark piece of legislation that laid out a process, an absolute process for getting a concealed carry permit if you met some very simple standards, none of them arbitrary. And while that process today looks like it's a little bit archaic, the fact of the matter is we ended up passing something that people didn't think you could pass, and that was legislation that made it so the average person who lived in Palm Beach County wouldn't have to go to the Palm Beach County Sheriff and prove that they needed to carry a gun against all the prejudices that existed, but instead would be able to get a license simply by applying, paying the money necessary to do it, and meeting some basic standards and have a license. The left said blood was going to run in the streets in the state of Florida. This was at the time of Miami Vice. Blood was running in the streets of the state of Florida. In the 20 years prior, from 63 to 87, the homicide rate had risen, I believe it was around 2.5 homicides per 100,000 from the number of about 3 to 3.3 that had existed in the 50s and the early 60s. So we had seen a massive increase in the number of homicides per 100,000. The number of people were dying in Florida. And so what happened? What was the result? Well, Justice Breyer needs to look at that result, because over the subsequent 25 years, I did a study on this 25 years ago, or about 5 years ago. Over the subsequent 25 years, the homicide rate went down to about the 1963 level. It literally dropped immediately and continued at a 1960, mid-60s level of the homicide rate. Rather than blood running in the streets, people were being saved. Their lives were being saved because there weren't as many homicides, because a lot of Floridians were carrying guns. And one of the proof points on that was after passage of the law, Florida had to pass another law. They had to pass a law changing how they did license plates, so people who were driving a rental car didn't have a distinct license plate, because people would attack rental cars and rob them because they knew that those people weren't able to defend themselves, and they would leave the people with Florida state plates alone in the state of Florida because they knew those people were likely to be able to defend themselves and have the means. It completely changed everything in terms of criminal behavior, and Florida became a politer society as a result. Stephen Breyer needs to look at that. When Stephen Breyer looks at the laws that pass in this country, what he will notice is that when you have laws that allow law-abiding citizens to carry a gun, you actually end up with safer streets. And that takes away the entire argument against it. It's constitutional, and it's good public safety policy. And given that, the Supreme Court should vote 9-0 for against the New York State concealed carry policy, which is discriminatory and is based on a precept that you don't have a right to protect yourself. You don't have a right to bear arms. In America, you do.
Well, thank you very much, Rick, for breaking that down for us. And I don't think we're going to get anything back from the Supreme Court in terms of a decision until June at the earliest.
June. Yeah, it's for a decision in June.
Okay. So we'll stay on top of that. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. And we hope that you're enjoying a great Veterans Day. And thanks again to all our veterans. And we will see you next time on an Americans for Limited Government live stream. And please, if you like what you see and you agree with our views about limited government, subscribe to our channel, tell your friends about it, share our videos, and help us grow our message. So have a great day.